Serious? Who would you name as the most evil human alive on Earth today? Peter Scully. Dude made and distributed snuff films with toddlers. There are petitions for the Philippines to bring back the death penalty just for him, and I fully support that. Never heard of him. Whoa. Pure evil. David and Louise Turpin. I believe they are both currently serving life sentences or at least some ridiculously long amount of time for the abuse and torture of their 13 children. I won't get into the horrific details here of what they did, but the kids were rescued from the situation about 4 years ago after one of them managed to escape in the middle of the night to call 911 from an old cell phone, and 2 of the daughters recently spoke out for a TV special. Sadly 5 of the kids went to a foster home, and were also adopted by the foster parents, where they were once again abused, and all of them have suffered from the social services system. One of the Sacklers, the family that knew opioid drugs were highly addictive and that people were becoming dependent on them, and yet they still pushed the meds onto the market because hey, they were making money, and that's all that counts, right? They're despicable people. When I was a teenager, my mom dated a guy who was a pharmaceutical rep. One of the things he pushed was Oxy. He got paid for each patient put on it. Eventually she figured out he was a scumbag. It's more like, who's the most evil notable person alive today? I'm sure there are some truly depraved serial killer types we won't know about for decades, if ever. There's too many. Way too many. I dread opening my news app every day as it's full of horror stories of raped, beaten, mangled children, like the recent story of Arthur LeBonjour Hughes. His dad and dad's GF conspired against this poor 6-year-old child to kill him by months of torture and salt poisoning. My brain cannot comprehend any of it. That butthole who decided to make insulin $600 for no reason other than greed. Same deal with EpiPens. EpiPens was Joe Manchin's daughter, at least in the state of WV. Joshua Milton Blahyi, sometimes called General Butt Naked, sounds funny but certainly isn't, claims to have killed at least 20,000 people and frequently caught and ate children as a sacrifice. The astounding part is that he walks free today as a preacher. There is a great Vice documentary about him on YouTube. Mary Beth Tinning. She killed 9 of her own infant children in the span of 14 years, which 8 were initially thought to be due poor genetics. Tinning killed infants because she was addicted to the sympathy from others because of their deaths. Kim Jong Un. Basically running a country-sized concentration camp, brainwashing entire generations of young Koreans who have so much potential, putting everyone in East Asia under constant threat of violence, all in a desperate attempt to hold on to power. I still say it's Kim Jong Un. The man rules his country like a tyrannical despot. He literally runs concentration camps that torture and kill innocent civilians for no reason whatsoever. A rough estimate for the number of detainees is around 120,000 to 200,000, though it could be closer to 1 million. The nation is so isolated we simply have no way to know for sure. To make matters worse, there is even a 3-generation rule over there. If you commit a crime, you, your kids, and your parents will all be sent to a labor camp and suffer. If that isn't enough, babies born to women who reside in the camps will be considered prisoners upon birth as well and be stripped from their mothers, subjected to torture, and forced into slave labor for the rest of their lives simply because they were born to a prisoner, and so on. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea is a stain on humanity and a living heck for the millions unlucky enough to have been born there. Sure, there are other despotic regimes, but none as brutal as the North Korean state. Leaders of Eritrea and Turkmenistan come very close for the same reasons. I think the real winners have already been thoroughly discussed here, but I think Andrew Wakefield, who published the fraudulent study about the MMR vaccine causing autism, deserves an honorable mention. There were anti-vax people before that study was published, but Wakefield really launched the idea into the mainstream. The mess we're in now with people refusing to get COVID vaccines can be traced back in large part to a conspiracy theory Wakefield ignited. The worst part is he wasn't even anti-vax to begin with. He just published that study so he could sell a different measles vaccine he had financial ties to. But when the anti-vax movement really picked up, he realized he could make his money on that instead. It would almost be better if he ever had any convictions to begin with, even if those convictions were stupid. He was also stripped of his medical license when it was discovered that the study was made up. Not bad science or bad interpretation or anything, just completely 100% made up. Rodrigo Duterte, the current Philippine president, is responsible for the death of thousands of alleged drug users, journalists, lawyers, activists, and indigenous groups. His control and influence over the Senate and House makes his regime even more terrifying. Rogue cops also increase due to his influence and shoot-to-kill order. He is more than willing to sell the Philippines to China because of his close ties with Xi Jinping. Despite all that, he has a massive cult following which spreads fake news and disinformation in my country. These so-called DDS or die-hard Duterte supporters are either trolls or delusion dumb enough to think that Duterte is the savior of this country. These people are also incredibly toxic on the internet and will curse, throw ad hominem insults at you whenever their overlord is criticized. The ICC wants to do an investigation on his alleged crimes, but refuses to cooperate. This man even has the balls to run again in the upcoming Senate elections, and her daughter, who is just as ruthless as his father, is running for vice president alongside with the son of the dead dictator Ferdinand Marcos for president. Frick Duterte. As a side note to that, frick you, Marcos. It's hard to say who fits that #1 spot. I'd vote for Kenneth Copeland. He's been manipulating my mom into taking her money for as long as I can remember. Plus he seriously looks evil when he gets intense into his demon spell casting stuff on stage. No, the question said alive on Earth today. Clearly, this man has been dead for years, and is simply being worn like a suit by a creature straight out of a horror movie. The OxyContin clan, aka the Sackler family, creators of OxyContin. Watch the HBO doc The Crime of the Century and you will hate the Sacklers and more. Yup, evil humans. Kenneth Copeland. The man looks like the devil on an extended vacation on Earth, who's having so much fun he doesn't want to go back, but now his stay up here is bringing a blight on the land. He looks like a demon wearing human skin. If you haven't heard of Bashar al-Assad and his father Hafiz al-Assad, you haven't heard of anything. Search for Tadma prison massacre and Hama massacre in the 1980s. Note, I am not Syrian, but I stand with my Syrian brothers and sisters. Search for Tadma prison massacre and Hama massacre in the 1980s. Small potatoes compared to setting off a massive civil war by bombing protesters, resulting in the deaths and displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. Xi Jinping, Kim Jong Un, Lukashenko. Frick this guy. This is horrible man who sent immigrants to polish Belarusian border just to let starve them and die in forest. He also didn't would be Belarusian president. He took the power by force votes. Boring answer, but considering what the Kim family has been doing for the past 73 years in North Korea, I'd have to say Kim Jong Un. 3 dictators who have just passed on the evil to their successors. 25 million people essentially living as puppets, with no free will to do as they please. Special mention to the Qatari, although not a specific person, who after being awarded the FIFA World Cup have been responsible for the death of at least 6,500 migrant workers, who are living as modern slaves. Putin. He's single-handedly backslid his country into brutal authoritarianism, is constantly threatening his neighbors with invasion, relentlessly harasses the entire world with targeted disinformation attacks. His operatives assassinate dissidents. He's old school, Cold War style evil. Shellie No Tech. I think she just got out of jail. Not just her, but collectively all the people like her. She was responsible for torturing 2 adults to death, killing the boy under her guardianship, torturing both her daughters. If you can stomach it, it's detailed in the book. If you tell. Crazy world. I read about these string of attacks in 2007 in Ukraine of these teenagers making snuff films by bashing in people's heads with hammers. They started with torturing animals to death and filming it and putting it on the internet. Eventually they started killing people. The details are quite gory. They killed 21 people total over like a month. 2 got sentenced to life and the guy who filmed only got 9 years. After he got out of prison, a woman married him and had 2 children with him. Matthew Israel, creator of the Judge Rotenberg Center. Look it, and him, up. It's horrifying and for some reason not well known. In a video that surfaced in 2011, JRC staff tied an autistic boy face down to a 4-point board and shocked him 31 times at the highest amperage setting. The first shock was given for failing to take off his coat when asked, and the remaining 30 shocks were given for screaming and tensing up while being shocked. The boy was later hospitalized with third-degree burns and acute stress disorder, but no action was taken against any of the staff as neither the law nor JRC policy had been broken. I beg your freaking pardon. How is it not against the law to electrocute torture children? Thanks to the wonderful podcasts of Robert Evans, I would like to nominate Eric Prince. I have a post saved for whenever that frickward Prince is mentioned, about his plan to recreate the East India Company and make Afghanistan, and potentially other places, into US colonies. The man who reinvented mercenary warfare described to Carlson a vision for a corporate military occupation apparatus that makes his infamous Blackwater look modest, despite its capturing of $1 billion in contracts during the Iraq War and occupation. Prince proposed nothing less than the revival of the British East India Company model of for-profit military occupation, wherein an armed corporation effectively governed most of India for the extraction of resources. There's $1 trillion in value in the ground, mining, minerals, and another $1 trillion in oil and gas, Prince says of Afghanistan. This would provide the revenue stream to replace government contracts. Prince's firm would be self-funded, self-reliant, and thus autonomous to a degree more similar to a nation state than a military contractor like Blackwater serving under a defense department. The corporate rulers, Prince suggests, would even reorganize objectives away from the original mission, that is, destroy the safe harbor for Al-Qaeda and other terror groups, and toward the prerogatives of profit. Prince critiques US strategic aims in Afghanistan to Carlson. Even the whole approach of placing bases US bases was all done to control land and territory but not the arteries that make money. Prince is proposing to send private contractors to Afghanistan instead of US troops, and have the entire operation overseen by a viceroy. Under Prince's plan, the viceroy would be a federal official who reports to the president and is empowered to make decisions about State Department, DOD, and intelligence community functions in country. Rupert Murdoch. Pretty much all evil men mentioned are in power thanks to the damaging efforts of the Murdoch press empire breeding chaos, fear-mongering, racism, misogyny, class warfare, anti-vax, and other misinformation everywhere in the West. All these sideshows of misinformation keep the West firmly entrenched in internal frictions while he gets more affluent, inflicting misery to millions via actual fake news. Any answer that isn't a despotic dictator is just wrong. If you measure by the cruelty of individual acts, then sure, go for a serial killer or whatever. However, none of them come close to the massive scale of suffering, corruption, body count caused by Kim Jong Un, Nicolas Maduro, Putin etc. I disagree. Dictators led their lives in near disconnect from the suffering of their people. It's not a factor in their daily lives. They make their evil decisions without seeing the individuals involved, more like groups of numbers. Counter that with some of the child raping monsters mentioned here, who experience their victims' suffering firsthand and draw satisfaction from it. A completely different level of evil, IMO. Kaja Godek, woman from Poland who fights to ban an abortion in any case and wants to send Polish women to prison for life sentence for having an abortion even if fetus is damaged and not able to exist outside mother's body. She is just pure evil. She has a son with Down syndrome, but not everyone is able to take care of kids with special needs. About a month ago, young woman died because doctors didn't abort a fetus which didn't develop a skull. They've been waiting for fetus to die by itself because some time ago Constitutional Court decided that abortion is against our constitution and doctors can lose their licenses and go to jail for abortion. And Kaja Godek still thinks it was okay because it was God's will and people can't decide who should live and who shouldn't. Pure evil, worse than Satan itself. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.